Hi, and thanks for joining me. This is the second part of the ramble I filmed earlier this year, before my accident. It's actually turned out to be a lot longer than I thought, so there's going to be a third instalment as well to finish it off. I'm out on Goldie the BSA Goldstar 650, and we've already travelled north up the east side of the River Trent to the Humber Estuary, then back south for a little while. We left off as we were leaving the hamlet of Colby, and I'm heading over to Winterton, so that's where I'll pick it up again. We're on the B1430, and just over the fields to our right is the site of Winterton Roman Villa that was discovered way back in 1747. It underwent several partial excavations during the 1960s and 70s. It turned out to be quite an extensive villa. A lot of the archaeological finds were dug up and several mosaic floors were uncovered. One of the mosaics and some of the other finds are on show in the North Lincolnshire Museum in Scunthorpe. Right turn now onto the A1077 to head south again for a short distance, then left back onto the B1430 to head into the market town of Winterton. The name probably comes from the Anglo-Saxon era. At that time it was the ancient kingdom of Lindsey, and one of the rulers of Lindsey was King Winter or Wintra. It's thought to mean the farmstead or village or estate of the Wintringers, who were presumably family and dependents of King Winter. Just down the road we've got the village of Wintringham, and that's also thought to relate to King Winter. Being an old town of reasonable size, there's quite a few listed buildings here. 27 actually, all grade 2, except for All Saints Church, which is a grade 1. As we've already seen with the villa just up the road, it has history going back to Roman times. In 1968, during road widening works on the A1077, a large stone coffin was unearthed. It contained the body of a young woman who became known as the Winterton Lady. She was obviously high status because of the quality of the coffin, which was made from a single block of limestone. Interestingly, the bottom of it was lined with lead. She was about 20 to 25 years old, and it's presumed that she lived in the villa just across the fields. The coffin and skeleton are on show in the North Lincolnshire Museum. As we come out of Winterton, there's this lovely and unusual old cast iron directions sign on the corner. It's got the town's name cast on the post. Just opposite's the showground, where they hold a number of different events during the year, and the annual Winterton Agricultural Show. I've been to several shows here with my military vehicles over the years. All very enjoyable. This is the A1077 we're joining again, and we're going to turn right to head east and follow the Humber Estuary towards the North Sea. It's quite a busy road because it carries a fair bit of traffic to the Humber Bridge from Scunthorpe. building on our left here is Eastfield Farm, and it dates from the late 1700s. It's Grade 2 listed. Just to the rear of it, in the fields, is the site of another Roman villa, though there's no real visible signs left now, but it's a scheduled monument. We're running along the edge of the Humber Estuary now, and you may just be able to see the Humber Bridge in the distance. We'll keep getting glimpses of it now for a while. This is a big cement works coming up on the right. It was built in 1938 by Eastwood Cement Company Limited. It was later bought by Rugby Cement and then Cemex. All the raw materials came from a big quarry on the hill just above it and to the east of South Ferriby. They're carried in by an overhead conveyor belt that's over a mile long. The plant was mothballed in 2020. There's a World War II pillbox here in front of the factory. This is one of many placed along both sides of the Humber Estuary to guard against invasion. It was built in 1942, and you can probably guess where the cement for the concrete came from. This is Ferriby Sluice, and the bridge takes us over the River Anshome that comes up from mid-Lincolnshire. We're coming into the village of South Ferriby now. As the name suggests, it was the site of a ferry landing, and on the opposite bank of the Humber there's a village of North Ferriby that was the other landing. Settlements here date back to at least Roman times. It sits on the edge of a chalk escarpment, and the road takes a steep climb up it here. The GoPro, as usual, makes everything look pretty flat, but this is quite a steep climb. This is the northern edge of the Lincolnshire Wolds. We're heading more or less due east towards the A15 Humber Bridge Road, but we're going to turn left here and drop down to the banks of the Humber Estuary. The buildings at the crossroads are Westfield Farm. The house and some of the outbuildings date from the early 1800s and they're Grade 2 listed. Most of the area in front of us is Far Ings National Nature Reserve. It covers around 200 acres. We're turning right now to head towards Barton-upon-Humber. We'll have a little run down into the Far Ings Nature Reserve and have a quick look round. In the 1850s, clay started to be dug from here to serve the local brick and tile industry that was building up. By the 1950s this had declined, and the pits were just left to fill with water and return to nature. Reed beds formed and a lot of wildlife took up residence. The whole area was taken over by the Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust in 1983 and opened as a nature reserve. In 2005 it was designated a National Nature Reserve. This is the visitors centre, and if we walk up the path at the side we get a great view out over the Humber Estuary. That of course is the Humber Bridge, carrying the A15 over to Holland the north. It's 1.38 miles long in a single span, and when it opened in 1981 it was the longest bridge of its type in the world. It lost this record in 1998, and today it's only the 12th longest. Before it was built there was a ferry from Hull to New Holland, and in the 1970s I actually used it once to ferry me and my car back from a trip to Hull. It was operated by paddle steamers, and I remember standing on a gantry overlooking the engine room for most of the journey, just watching the steam engine working below. Fascinating. It was the last paddle steamer working, that ferry, and it was called Lincoln Castle. It was withdrawn from service in 1978 and finally ended up in Alexandra Dock in Grimsby as a floating restaurant. Sadly, it was badly neglected, and despite attempts to save it, it was finally scrapped in 2010. We're passing under the A15 now as we head into Barton-upon-Humber. There's traces of settlements here dating back to Neolithic period, but interestingly, though Roman artefacts have been discovered, there's no sign of a Roman settlement. A hoard was discovered at nearby Deepdale in 1979 that consisted of 260 silver and 1 gold Roman coins. Parts of the hoards on display in the British Museum in London, and some's in other local museums. During construction of air raid shelters in 1939, an Anglo-Saxon cemetery was unearthed. It contained 227 bodies, one of which had undergone a trepanning to the skull. So, did we have brain surgery in the Anglo-Saxon era, I wonder? Over the wall on our left is an old rope works that dates from 1767. The rope walk, where the long lengths of rope were made, about 325 metres long. It produced rope up to its closure in 1989. It's a heritage centre and museum now, and Grade 2 listed building. There's 2 old churches in Barton right next to each other. The first one's St Peter's, and it dates from the 9th century. There's a late medieval hall just at the back of it, and the site of a Saxon manor that's a scheduled monument. The second, over the road here, is St Mary's. This one's a bit later and dates from the 14th century. They're both Grade 1 listed buildings. This is a lovely old part of Barton with its duck pond and green, and I'll just circle round to give you a bit of a view. windmill over to our right's an old flour mill. It was built around 1803 and it stands on the site of an Anglo-Saxon burial ground. Originally it had 6 sails, but these were removed in the late 1860s after one of them is reported to have fallen off into the road. Gas engine was installed then and it kept working into the 1950s. It's Grade 2 listed and today it's a pub and restaurant. As we leave Barton, there's the War Memorial outside the big cemetery. It was erected in 1921 and commemorates the fallen of both World Wars. It's Grade 2 listed. I can't leave Barton without mentioning the annual Barton Bike Night. It's one of the biggest in the country and attracts hundreds of bikes and thousands of people. A few years ago it was estimated that about 15,000 visitors attended. I've been a few times and the centre of the town gets closed off except for bikes and people. It's difficult to move around in places and almost impossible to see all the bikes. It does hold bittersweet memories for me though, because one year, a long time ago, I went on my Yamaha VMAX. Now, these are a bit of a hooligan bike, and back then I sometimes rode it that way. Riding home from the bike night on a particularly fast stretch of country road, I happened to pass a hidden police speed trap at a fair old rate. I won't tell you what speed I was clocked at, but it resulted in a driving ban and a fine. It turned out to be a big wake-up call for me, and very shortly after I sold the VMAX and vowed to stick to speed limits from then on. I do try to all the time now. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here for this instalment. Hope you've found a few snippets of useful or interesting information, if you're still with me, and hope you can join me for the next one. Please leave a like, if in fact you did, and a comment. I always try to answer them. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of my ramblings, and hit the notification button. I hope to catch you on the next one, so cheers for now.